Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, TomKat Stitchery. I'm Whitney and today we have another learning fabric with TomKat Stitchery. Today we are going to be tackling silk, which is a very gigantic category. But yeah, we're going to cover some of the basics if you're new to working with silk and that kind of thing. Just a little bit of information. But before I do, I have some exciting announcement. I'm going to have my phone here just for a second. I want to make sure I get the information correct here. Okay, so Itch to Stitch, as you all know, is one of my absolute favorite pattern companies. They are re-releasing some of their, they're expanding their size range basically, which is so exciting, so very exciting. I know a ton of you have asked about that. And anyway, I knew that she had done a tester call for the Mountain View pull-on jeans a while ago, and it's being released today, which is very exciting. So I just wanted to tell you, they now go up to 54 and a, well, the pattern, the Mountain View pull-on jeans. I'll talk about that pattern in just a second. But the pattern now goes up to 54¼ inch for the waist and 62 inches for the hips. Which is very exciting. So what it sounds like is that now when you get that pattern, and she's extending her size range period, so hopefully she'll be going back and doing a whole bunch of her older patterns, her real popular ones, but you'll get 2 size range patterns when you buy that pattern now. And if you've purchased the Mountain View pull-on jeans before, you can now go back and actually download that second size range set as well. So you'll just have, you'll get both whenever you purchase the pattern, which is very exciting. She's got some beautiful tester pictures that are up in the new extended size range. And if you're wondering, the Mountain View pull-on jeans, I made 3 pairs of those last fall, and I'm going to pop a link up to the video, and I'll also link the video down below. I love that pattern. It is so comfortable. Joann Fabrics actually had some stretch corduroy last season. I don't know if they'll have it again this season or not, but it worked perfectly for that pattern. I made 2 pairs of corduroy pants, and the pattern actually looks, it's a boot cut pattern, but she gives you instructions on how to make those a skinny leg as well. So there's a million different, I've made like a straight leg version, a skinny version in actual stretch denim, and then I've made just the regular boot cut kind of flare in a corduroy as well. And they both have been worn in straight rotation all the way through the colder months last fall and winter. So yeah, you can go check out that video if you're interested. I'll leave a link down to the pattern down below. It's the same link as the previous pattern. I'm an affiliate with Itch to Stitch, which means I do make a commission if you use that link to buy the pattern. But that's, I just want to be upfront about that. But anyway, very exciting news that she's extending her pattern range, and if you're interested in that, it's on sale, I believe, right now. Usually her stuff's on sale for the first, yes. It's 20% off through August 9th, 2020. So, and it says the volume discount still applies. So you get an additional 15% off your entire cart if you purchase 20 or more, or 20% off your entire cart if you purchase $30 or more. So anyway, it's very exciting, and it's a fantastic pattern. Like I said, I made 3 of them. I would definitely make more, especially the jean version gets, my denim version gets worn a ton. They're my favorite skinny jean pattern to throw on, like a jegging almost. Anyway, I just wanted to let you all know that exciting news, and I'll put all that below. Also, I've had some questions about where to find the links. If you are watching this on a computer, YouTube, on just regular YouTube, right below the video, you'll see the title of the video. And then there'll be usually a couple of sentences, like, hello, or welcome back to, happy Tuesday, happy Friday, whatever, will be under there. If you look kind of to the right of that, there will either be, it'll say show more, or there'll be a little arrow that you can click. If you hit the show more or the arrow, that is the description box, and all the dialogue will then drop down, and you'll be able to see all the links that I talk about, what I'm currently wearing. In the video, I always have a link to that pattern if it's a pattern, or I'll say it's ready to wear if it is, and also my lipsticks. I have a lot of questions about my lipsticks. Anyway, that's how you get to the description box, and that's where all the links for always what I'm wearing, and then anything that I've talked about in the video is all down below there. There's a lot of information. I spend a lot of time putting together a lot of the links so you guys can easily hop around to different things. And if it is an affiliate link, which means I make a commission if you use that, I do note that it is affiliate. Not all the links I use are affiliate. In fact, a very small percentage, but if it is, I do write affiliate just so we're all up front and you know that kind of what you're getting. Okay, so that was the exciting news for today. Let's dig into silk. All right. I know if you've been sewing, maybe not that long, that, oh, I also have Gidget here with me. Gidget just got, I'm gonna let her sleep for right now. She'll be in the weekly vlog though. That's the video that goes up on Wednesdays. She just got back from being at the vet for a week while we were traveling. We board her at our vet. They've got a fantastic facility there. And she also got groomed while she was there. So she had a puppy spa week while we were in Colorado. I'm gonna let her sleep for now though, bless her heart. She's just, I think, very glad to be home. All right, silk. Silk is one of those fibers that can be extremely intimidating for newbies, mostly because I think that it comes along with the fact, I mean, it can be tricky to sew depending on the weave of silk you're using. So we've kind of talked in this series a little bit about the difference between a fiber and a weave. So a fiber is the actual material that's used to make the fabric, whether that's, you know, a linen, a cotton, a silk, a rayon, wool, polyester. That is the fiber. And then they take that fiber and they either knit it into something stretchy. So that's usually, although knitted doesn't always mean stretchy, but it's either knitted like you would with knitting needles, but they do it on a big machine, or it's woven, which is, you know, just like when you think of weaving where it's like, you know, you're warp and weft. So that is what makes the weave of the fabric. So talking about silk, yes, silk can be a little bit trickier because it by nature, or its natural, what am I trying to say here? Its natural characteristics, I guess, is that it does tend to be a little bit slippier, and so some of the weaves can be a little trickier just because they shift around, a lot like rayon, they shift around. But that is not the case for all silks. And there's also, I know, a lot of a misconception, I guess, that silk has to be dry cleaned. Not true. So let's dig in and talk a little bit about silk. Okay, so silk. Silk is one of the absolute strongest, toughest fibers that there is. In fact, a little fun fact, the very first bulletproof vests were made out of layers of silk fabric, and that is it. That is how strong silk is. If you Google first bulletproof vests, well, you'll see a guy actually shooting in close range another man in the chest to test out the bulletproof vest. That was all made with silk. And I believe the whole story goes that it was a cowboy who had a silk handkerchief that he would wear, you know, for the dust and that kind of stuff in some sort of a shootout. And the silk, the layers of silk stopped the bullet from piercing his neck, I believe, or something along those lines, which was then he went on to create the very first bulletproof vest, which was made out of silk. So it is a very, very strong and very tough fiber, which can be misleading because it can be woven, because it is so strong, it can be woven into some like gossamer thin, beautiful weaves that would appear to be very delicate. And while they are technically, it's because the fiber itself is so strong. So silk comes from the silkworm, and it's kind of what it makes its cocoon out of. I mean, there's definitely more sustainable ways that silk is harvested and less sustainable ways. I know that there's some ways that a silk is harvested where the actual worm is killed in the process, and then there's more expensive but more sustainable ways where they actually let the silkworm come out of its cocoon, and then they will harvest the cocoons to then turn it into, you know, go through the process of turning it into usable fibers. So it's kind of like spider web, kind of, you know, but it is a protein fiber, which means, you know, it comes from an animal. So wool is also a protein fiber. And it also, like your hair, that's all protein fibers. Your fingernails, all protein fibers, which kind of gives you a little bit more of an idea of how to care for it, if that kind of makes sense. So yes, while silk is definitely, I mean, it's more expensive because it is harder to harvest, but it is, my watch is going nuts on me here. So it is a little bit harder to harvest, but it is a fantastic fiber that can last forever. Now, I do want to note, because it is a protein fiber, it is also can be prone to bugs. So, you know, just like your wools and that kind of thing, you do want to make sure that you're keeping it in a safe area. Actually, I was just talking to someone on, I think it was an email or a comment, about caring for fabrics and making sure that you're keeping the buggies out of, you know, your fabric stash, basically. And I do get a little worried, especially about my wool, but also your silk can also be damaged by bugs as well. So just kind of a little side note. Now, caring for silk. I'm gonna blow some minds here. I don't dry clean my silk ever, because the chemicals that they use for dry cleaning are really, really hard on silk. It's just like how you would treat your hair. If you use a light, gentle soap on your silk, it can definitely be washed in the washing machine. I wash all of my silk in the washing machine, and actually, while heat's actually not the best for anything, honestly, but I do dry my silk in the dryer for the first round, just in case something were to get thrown into the dryer, you know, once it's been washed. So before, just like I think I've said that with a few, like my rayon, ton of it, I will put it into the dryer on a normal, you know, regular heat cycle, low tumble dry, with my yardage before I make anything out of it. Now, with silk, that will change the hand of it. And what that means is, for instance, Charmeuse. Let me find my Charmeuse here. I've got some examples. Here's some Charmeuse. Okay, so Charmeuse, and we'll talk more about the different weaves here in a second, but it is thin, but it is shiny on one side and then matte on the other side. Now, when you wash Charmeuse and dry it, it becomes a little less shiny. That becomes a little less apparent, and it becomes quite softer, almost like a washed silk, like a really soft washed silk. I love washing Charmeuse. In fact, it's my favorite way of using Charmeuse. It can be too shiny for me when it hasn't been washed. So I can, you know, it takes the sheen down just a little bit, but so yeah, that's what I mean when I say it'll change the hand just a little bit. It softens things up, I guess, is kind of a good way to describe that. But yeah, I wash all of my silk in the washing machine, and then I'll dry it the first time, and then once it's been made into a garment, it'll just hang to dry. Now, if I were making a silk suit, for instance, and again, we'll talk about weaves here in a second, obviously all that interfacing, and if I built in a blazer or something or a jacket, I'm not gonna wanna wash that. That probably will go to the dry cleaner just because it's got stuff built into it. So, you know, kind of pick your battles there. But for the most part, I will wash, if it's got fusible interfacings and stuff, you know, dresses, tops, they get washed in the washing machine. If you're worried about things getting torn up, you can always put them into a lingerie bag. I use lingerie bags religiously to do almost all of my delicate wash, and that includes my rayon pieces, my merinos, because my merino wools can be washed as well, those knits that I use, all go into lingerie bags just to help with the agitation and that it's not making them too, getting them too wrapped up and that kind of stuff. However, silk is just as strong wet as it is dry. Rayon, someone had mentioned that when the rayon video, and yes, it is true. Rayon becomes very weak when it's wet, which means it can easily be distorted. It can be pulled off grain, that kind of thing. But silk is not. It is very strong, both wet and dry. So anyway, but because silk is very strong and a very tough fiber, silk will actually dull your scissors it's way harder on your scissors than paper is. So, you know, do you necessarily need a separate pair of scissors for silk? Probably not. Just be aware, if you've cut through a lot of silk, you probably either need to have your scissors sharpened or you need to put a new blade in your rotary blade. I tend to use rotary blades most of the time. I will use scissors for clipping into things, and then I have those sharpened on occasion. But silk is it will dull your scissors almost instantaneously, even if you're cutting out a really thin silk. So just be aware of that. Also with silk, if you do prefer to cut with scissors instead of a rotary cutter, I highly recommend a pair of serrated scissors, which, you know, serrated is where the little blade goes like this. The micro serration, you can't even see that it goes up and down, but that does help lift and pick up and grip. Sometimes when you're cutting silk, because of the nature of it, it kind of pushes the fabric when you're cutting, if that makes sense, which can make it really hard to cut out, which I think, and that's, again, with the lighter things, like if your crepe de chines, your charmeuses, your chiffons, Georgettes, any of those can definitely, they're slippier weaves. But I just do everything on the cutting mat and don't have any issues whatsoever with things shifting. Everything's weighted down. And yeah, I can keep things on grain pretty easily. So, but yeah, if you do prefer scissors, I would recommend a pair of serrated, micro serrated scissors. It just makes cutting silk a little bit, it grips the silk a little bit better, so it's not sliding all over the place. So there's a little tip for you. Okay, so basically, don't be scared to wear silk. I know a lot of people, it is a more expensive fabric, and so people tend to shy away from it. You know, like, oh, I would never wear silk during the day. Also, the whole myth that silk spots, it does. When you get silk wet, it will spot. However, if you've washed it before you've made something out of it, it does no longer spots. So you can wash it again in the washing machine. So if you wear a silk blouse or whatever out into the rain and it gets rained on, you just wash it, and the spots, there's no staining of any kind of water spots or any of that kind of thing. So a lot of the myths of silk can be dispelled. It's a wonderful fabric to wear. It is extremely breathable. It will also keep you warm in winter months. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into the weaves. It is a natural fiber, so you know, it doesn't hang on to, like polyester doesn't hang on to smells or bacteria or that kind of thing. It's a fantastic fiber. It's one of my absolute favorite things to line garments with. And I know that sometimes you can get, you know, making a dress or something, you're like, oh my gosh, the silk lining was more expensive than the outside. And that could be the case, and maybe that's not your cup of tea. However, if you've ever worn a dress with a silk charmeuse lining against your skin, you will never want to go back. It is heaven. And the same can be said for silk undergarments as well. Just heaven against your skin to wear. It feels, and oh, just the breathability. It is absolute the top in luxury. So don't push it aside just because sometimes, yeah, maybe the lining of your dress might be more expensive than the actual outside fabric that someone may never see, but it's there for you. And it's wonderful. So that is kind of the beginning. I just wanted to say you don't need to be scared to sew with silk. You know, you can find it maybe less expensive, but you know, use it on a pattern that you already know fits you. It's really not that much different to sew with. In fact, I would rather sew with silk than polyester, to be honest. So a lot of the silk weaves also come in polyester. I have a polyester sister or cousin, however you want to say that. I much prefer to sew with silk. Silk grips much better than a polyester does. So, you know, if you've got two layers together that you're trying to sew together, the silk will grip much better together than a polyester counterpart. So when I was sewing for clients, I would charge more to put in a polyester lining into something than I would charge to put in a silk lining, because it was so much easier to work with silk than polyester, if that kind of makes sense. And it's got more longevity. Yeah, again, it's a very, very tough fiber, so you'd be surprised what the thinness of silk can do. Now, it does have a lot of shared properties with rayon, because when rayon was created well, actually rayon was created at the turn of the century, but it really came into, or at the late end of the 1800s, it really came into vogue around wartime because of rationing. Now, rayon, it was billed as fake silk, basically, or a silk replacement. So there is a lot of similarities between rayon and silk, because that is why rayon was made as a substitute for silk, a more affordable option when you couldn't afford silk. But rayon is much, much heavier. So if you had a rayon crepe versus a silk crepe de chine or crepe, you will notice the rayon is way heavier than the silk, and the silk's a lot stronger too. So, you know, there you go on that. Okay, let's talk about different weaves, and let's see, we'll start with the more stable. If you're new to sewing with silk, obviously, I would recommend starting with something a little bit more stable. This is silk Dupioni. Now, silk Dupioni, you see the way that it changes, the sheen changes. Dupioni is it's a woven, and it's a very crisp hand. So as you can see, I mean, it just stays up just like that. It's got a lot of body in it. It's great for underlining things. I know that the tweed, or the classic tweed jacket, the Chanel style jacket on the class that's on Blueprint Craftsy, whatever you want to call it, whatever it's being called now. But she actually lines her jacket in Dupioni, as opposed to like a slippier Charmeuse or, you know, that kind of silk, because it does give the jacket more body. So these are great as underlinings for things. Oh, I didn't grab any silk organza. We'll talk about that in a second. but it's just got a lot more body and will help hold things. Now, one of the characteristics of Dupioni, you can see that it's got a lot of like little slubs that are in here. That's perfectly natural. It's part of the charm of the fabric. And often it is woven in 2 different colors. Now this one I think is it's this blue, kind of this ice blue on one, let's see, the warp. And on the weft, it's navy. So you see the different, that's where you're getting the navy here, which is why it changes color. Now this one is not as dramatic. I mean, some of them can be like orange one way and green one way, so it looks orange in certain light and green in another light. This one's a little bit more subdued a little bit, but yes, Dupioni, it is a great one to start off with. Now, because this has body, it's great for fitted dresses or even fit and flare dresses because it will hold that large skirt out really well if you really want that kind of a fit and flare exaggerated shape. But it's great for like fitted bodices, that kind of thing. It holds up really, really well. This is also great for shirts. So if you're wanting to do a crisp tailored shirt, Dupioni is fantastic for that kind of thing. And you can do lighter weight trousers out of this as well because it is pretty opaque. So if you're wanting to do a more fitted tailored pair of something that doesn't have a lot of drape, which is usually a little bit more fitted, you can use Dupioni as well. Oh, hair on my lipstick. So, very easy to work with. If you've never worked with silk before, I highly recommend this. And usually you can find Dupionis for a little bit less money. I think they even sell it at fabric.com, to be honest. If you're just kind of wanting to try out. This is also great for little girl dresses. Again, this will spot unless you wash it before you sew with it. Wash it before you sew with it, you're good to go. And Dupioni does soften up a little bit when you wash and dry it. So there's that little tip. Again, I would not dry things once they've been made into garments. I would just let them hang dry, maybe throw them back in the dryer just for a couple of minutes just to fluff it with like a wet washcloth to release some wrinkles and just soften it a little bit. But for the most part, things get hung to dry once they've been made up. Okay. Also, we have some silk shantung. Silk shantung and Dupioni do get mixed around a little bit, but shantung is more of like a suiting weight. So it doesn't have the sheen, the back and forth sheen that Dupioni does, but it is great for suits and that kind of thing. So I don't know if you can kind of see, it's almost like a tweed weave a little bit. But it will also have the little nubbies in there. And that just comes from the irregularity of the silk when it's coming through and getting woven. So you will also get those little nubs, but it's just great. It feels fantastic. Again, I would wash and dry this. And yeah, I love this color. This came from my mentor Joyce's stash. She had a lot of silk that I grabbed. But yeah, it's also a nice stable one. You could make pants, you could make a jacket. I would use this as you would use suiting. You know, like any kind of wool suiting or cotton suiting or any kind of suiting really, to do pants and jackets and that sort of thing. So that's a shantung. Oh, I didn't grab any raw silk. Raw silk or silk noil is very similar, but it's pretty thick. And it is also very, very, very nubby. I also wash and dry that before I do anything with it. I have a jacket out of it right now that you guys actually can't see quite yet, but it's lovely. It's a lovely fabric to work with. Again, very stable. You can do jumpsuits out of them. You can do dresses. You can do suiting. I know Blackbird Fabrics carried some for a while. They had a linen noil or it was a blend. It wasn't silk, and then so it was cheaper, but then they also had silk noil in a whole bunch of different colors. So it's got some drape. It's not quite as stable as like a wool would be, but you can do really cool jackets with it. Again, like boiler suits and jumpsuits and that sort of thing. It's a lovely fabric to wear. Also, if you wash and dry it, sometimes you can even do boxier tops and stuff like that woven out of it. It's a pretty wonderful fabric as well. And I thought I had some here, but I don't, so sorry about that. But yes, raw silk and silk noil are kind of the same thing and are very similar. And they're just a real great, it's almost kind of spongy, just a little bit once you've washed and dried it, and makes just a lovely, stable silk to use. So I would highly recommend that as well. Next up here, this is a silk jacquard, also known as tie silk, as in T-I-E silk. This is, I got this at Fabric Mart Fabrics. They've got tie silk a lot, which means it's meant for like men's ties. However, I love, it's a Jacquard, so it's got like a raised, woven pattern in here, which you can see. But I love using this for coat linings. So I will use tie silk for coat linings, and you can usually get it for a really good price at Fabric Mart when when they do have stuff on sale, when they are running their, they'll do sales where it's like, S through whatever, Z or whatever is on sale for 50% off. It's a great time to pick this up. But I love this for like coat lining, like actual coats, because it is very sturdy. It has body to it because it's just like, a men's tie. If you can it's got a lot of body, but it's fantastic for coat linings, especially more tailored coats where you want things to kind of stand away from the body, a little bit, to be a little bit more structured. I've used this quite often actually for that kind of thing. Now, you do want to be careful when you're looking at tie silks. They come very narrow, sometimes just 40 inches, if even that. So you do want to be aware of that if you're buying any tie silk. And I'm saying tie, T-I-E, not T-H-A-I. That's just, because T-H-A-I silk is just, so they have all the silks that come in different weaves. But yeah, any kind of tie silk, it's usually a Jacquard, silk Jacquard, and it's got some body in it. I really like it for coat linings. Okay, now we will get into some of the drapier, let's talk about silk blends first. I have got here, this is a silk linen blend from Mood. I bought a whole bunch of it a long time ago because it's when they used to do their $5 a yard sales. It'd be one cut of fabric. I think I bought 5 yards of it because I actually used it for a sewing competition I entered in. But silk works wonderful as a blend. So you can find silk cotton blends, you can find silk linen blends, silk wool blends. Basically, it takes whatever it's blended with, like the linen, the cotton, the wool, and just gives it a nice shine and a little bit more drape than it would have otherwise. But it is, definitely keep your, obviously it's cheaper if it's a blend because you're blending it with a less expensive fiber, but keep your eyes open for that kind of thing as well. That's a good way to kind of dip your toe into silk a little to get some of the benefits, but still not be quite as expensive, so not quite as scary and a little bit more stable. So this is a silk linen. Now, your trickier silks. Like I showed you before, silk charmeuse is one that you see a lot. And this is kind of your scarier silks. So again, this has the satin side on one and kind of the crepe side on the other. I guess it's crepe. Yeah, but it's thicker than like a crepe de Sheen. Anyway, don't get this confused with crepe back satin. That is something else. It's just thicker. It's like crepe back satin is a really thick charmeuse basically. But it has gorgeous drape. It feels fantastic against the skin. Your charmeuses tend to be a little bit thicker than your crepes, so we'll be going descending into lighter fabrics. So we'll start with the charmeuse. Yes, it is slippery. I personally don't do anything different when I'm cutting things out. I still double it up, cut things out per normal. However, when I'm doing charmeuse, I will double it up and I will do the matte sides together, not the shiny sides together, because the shiny side, the satin side, just by the nature of its weave, is just slipperier. So if you put the matte sides together, they do tend to stick just a little bit better, just as a little side note. But again, washing and drying them does help with that. It does make it a little stickier, so it doesn't slide around quite as much. Although if you're very nervous about it, you can definitely just lay your fabrics out single layer and cut things out single layer. That's always a fantastic option. I know a lot of people do the tissue paper, and then they lay the silk out, and then they do another layer of tissue paper, and then cut through the paper to keep everything square. You can do that if you want. I mean, if that makes you more comfortable, if you find that gives you the best results, definitely, that's fine. I've never done that. So, and I've sewn with a lot of silk. So it's just kind of, whatever you're more comfortable with. I've just never really had an issue with my silk shifting around so much and getting so off grain that I needed to do that. Silk on the bias will grow, but not nearly as badly as rayon, because again, rayon's a heavier fiber, which makes it really hang and go off, it'll drop, your hems will drop really bad. Silk will too, but not nearly as badly as rayon. So you do want to keep that keep that in mind. Again, silk charmeuse is a lovely lining. It makes fantastic lingerie. You can definitely make tops out of it, bias cut dresses, anything lovely. I mean, if you really want to challenge yourself, cut some bias cut dresses with some silk charmeuse. If you're really wanting to challenge with the fabric, but it does hug the figure beautifully. It's a lovely, lovely fiber. I really love silk charmeuse for linings, but it is a little bit pricier, so it kind of depends on where I'm at in my budget and if that's going to work or not. Camisoles. Oh, it makes fantastic camisoles, and I did inherit just some little pieces from my mentor Joyce when I inherited her fabric stash, but it is a lovely one to work with. All right, let's talk about some crepe de chine. Crepe de chine is a little bit thinner than charmeuse, and it is a crepe, so it has the twisted fibers that, you know, like a wool crepe or whatever would have as well. It's just harder to see in the silk, but it's the same on both sides. It's a little bit thinner. It has beautiful drape. It's not as heavy as silk charmeuse, so it doesn't drape quite as much, but it still has a lovely drape. This is beautiful for blouses. It's beautiful for dresses, although a lot of times it does need a lining because it can be a little bit see-through. It's, yeah, crepe, and usually it's crepe de chine is what you will see. This is where you kind of get into the, and same with charmeuse, I guess, more where you'll see polyesters as well, like polyester crepes. A crepe de chine in silk is so much easier to work with than a polyester crepe. It doesn't slide around nearly as much. So that's just a little something to keep in mind if you're a little bit nervous. Gosh, you can do camisoles really well out of this. I don't line with this as much because it is stickier than a charmeuse, which is, I mean, it's fine. It's still silk, but it sticks just a little bit more. So I would never do a jacket in this because it would, you know, you're trying to put, or I would never line a jacket with this because if you're trying to put your sleeve in, it would not slide in easily. It would stick because of the nature of the crepe, because it's a twisted weave. That's how they get that crepe texture. But it is a beautiful thing to use for real flowy dresses. You could do skirts too if you wanted, like bias cut skirts, camisoles. It's a lovely one to try. And it's a pretty easy one to find when you can find silk because it is one of the more popular. Next, we're going to talk about Georgette, and Georgette is kind of in between a crepe and a chiffon. So Georgette is beautiful for blouses. Sometimes you can get away without having to line it or wear anything underneath it. Kind of depends on the color, but it's a pretty thin fabric, and so a lot of times you do need to have something underneath it. I'd stick with more blouses, that kind of things, you know, like toppers, you know, like a duster style robe type over dress, you know, that kind of thing would be beautiful in Georgette. There were a couple of patterns not that long ago that were like an overlay where they had like an embroidered overlay and then like a slip kind of underneath it. Georgette's beautiful for that. Yeah, it's a lovely fabric to work with. It does get a little bit slipperier, but you can also, okay, we're gonna halt for just a second. Your crepe de chine also comes, you can buy 3-ply crepe and 4-ply crepe. 3-ply and 4-ply crepe, it's the same thing. It's just, it's got layers basically, so it's thicker. So each ply gets thicker and thicker. So like a 4-ply crepe, which is usually really expensive. We're talking like even at wholesale, I'm probably paying $40 to $45 a yard of that for a 4-ply silk. But it is so fantastic. The drape on it's gorgeous. It's perfect for like trousers, like a drapey pair of, you know, fitted at the waist and then real drapey pair of trousers. I made a dress for my sister out of a 4-ply crepe. I think it was 4, maybe it was 3, and a royal blue for a wedding that she was in, because they got to pick the, it had to be a certain color, but they got to pick the style, and I made her a dress for that. If I can find that picture, I'll pop it up here. But anyway, that it's gorgeous. So do keep in mind that if you see something that says like a 3-ply crepe, 4-ply crepe, that's what that means. It's just the same fabric. It just gets thicker with the more plies. The same with Georgette. You can get like a double-ply Georgette or even a triple. It just makes it just a little bit thicker. But your typical Georgettes are going to be, you know, somewhat transparent. So I've made some blouses out of Georgette before that did not need to have anything underneath them because the colors and the print was busy enough that you couldn't see through it. But it is not as thin as Chiffon, which is our last one here. Well, not really. I have one more to talk about, which is our last one here. Chiffon is usually like tissue thin where you can see right through it. It is gorgeous. It's very delicate. Again, if you watch Karina on Lifting Pins and Needles, she sews with chiffon all of the time. She is like the master of sewing with chiffon. For these lighter weight silks also, spray starch, and you can make your own. You don't have to buy spray starch. You can make your own with some cornstarch, look up recipes, that kind of thing. But if you wash and dry your fabric and then spray and iron the entire yardage before you cut out, it makes sewing with them so much easier because they get super crisp. Because as you can see, it's pretty drapey. And chiffon, I mean, just barely setting something on your cutting table can make it woof up, you know, like tissue paper, and all of a sudden it all blows off the table so easily. Chiffon will do that too. So spray starching will help with any of these, with the Charmeuse, the Crepes, the Georgettes, the chiffons. And then once you're finished sewing with it, you just have to pop it back in the wash and all that starch will come out. So yeah, so there's definitely options there. And I mean, any of the quilting, I know that there's some concoctions that quilters will make to help get things really crisp while they're working with it, and then it will wash out. I feel like vodka is involved for some reason. Is there a vodka? I'm not a quilter, but I feel like my husband's aunt is, and I feel like there was some sort of vodka concoction to spray, and it made things real crisp, but maybe I'm making that up. Google it. But anyway, chiffon is fantastic as like little overlays, tops. You usually have to wear something underneath it, but man, is it beautiful. And again, the silk chiffon is much easier to work with than the polyester, in my opinion. So that is chiffon. Okay, the final one, not the final one, sorry. I keep saying that, I don't mean that. Another fantastic one that is satin kind of on both sides is China silk. And you can see through there. This makes a lovely lining. It's also called silk habitois, or habitoi, H-A-B-A-T-O-I. Is that right? You'll see them both. They're the same thing. It's basically just a really thin silk. And it's satin on, it's kind of has a satin weave on both sides, but it makes a beautiful lining. To feel it, it almost feels like an acetate, like with the thinness of like an acetate lining. But man, it's strong, a lot stronger than an acetate. And it's fantastic for any kind of linings in dresses or jackets because it is nice and thin, and it is slippery on both sides, so you can get sleeves in really, really easily. This is actually the fabric I used to line my skirt, my couture skirt that I did at the beginning of the year. I have quite a bit of this. Be a lot of royal blue linings in my future. But that's typically a little bit less expensive, and it's fantastic for linings. And if I will put a link down below, Dharma Trading Company, which does a ton of stuff with dyeing and that kind of thing, they also started selling some colors of silk charmeuse, silk crepe, and China silk, or the silk habitoi. Habitoi? I'm probably butchering the way that you pronounce that. But they do have some colors of that, and it's for a very reasonable price. So if you are interested in just maybe trying out some different linings. Now their silk charmeuse is pretty thin. You a lot of times see, it'll say silk charmeuse and it'll be like 12 mm. That is 12, is it mummy, something like that. It's basically the weight. The higher that number, the thicker the fabric is. So it is a very thin silk charmeuse. I don't know that I would use it necessarily for garment sewing. I would use it for linings, and the same with the crepe and the China silk. Maybe for undergarments if you were going to be making some nightgowns or underwear and that kind of thing, you know, bras, underwear, that might be fine for that, but do keep that in mind. But I'll link down below to Dharma. It's just a great place. I get rayon from them too, and you can get things that are ready to be dyed as well, because, you know, that's what they do. It's kind of their main thing. All right, the last thing I wanted to talk about, and I don't have any here with me, is silk jersey. You can find silk jersey. It is not readily, it's like super readily available, But if you can find it, buy some. I've had a lot of people that have asked that live in colder climates or where it gets super cold in the winter time about base layers. And while merino is fantastic for base layers, especially the merino poly that I was using for some of my active wear from the fabric store, a lot of people can't wear merino. Now, merino is different than regular wool, so if you can't wear regular wool, you very well might be able to wear merino, but some people that have the wool allergy also cannot wear merino. So definitely give it a try, even if I have very sensitive skin, but I can wear merino against my skin. But definitely, you know, if you do have an allergy, you might not be able to wear merino either. But you might, kind of type thing. So definitely give it a try. But silk jersey is another fantastic fiber for base layers because it will keep you cool in the summer and keep you warm in the winter. It is lovely for like a long underwear situation or, you know, tight fitting tank tops or vests, whatever you call it, that you wear underneath your clothing, or even long sleeved base layers. Even if you're into skiing and that kind of thing, the silk jersey is fantastic. It will keep you warm and toasty, but it's still really lightweight. So you don't have a lot of bulk when you're layering over it. It also makes beautiful dresses, you know, silk jersey, beautiful jumpsuits. I mean, it still has that sheen, just like silk does, and that beautiful drape, but it is pricey. But yeah, if that's something that you're kind of looking for, it does exist and it is fantastic. So if you want to splurge and do some silk jersey for some base garments or even overgarments, you know, dresses and that kind of thing. It is out there. You just might have to hunt for it a little bit more. Okay, that is it for my lesson on silk. I'm sure there's a ton of stuff I didn't cover. If you have any questions about silk, whether or not your garment or your fabric has silk, it's a really easy one to do a burn test on. Light it, blow it out. If it smells like burnt hair, like your hair dryer when a little hair gets wrapped in there, it's silk. If it's rayon, it will smell like a campfire, like wood fire, but there's a distinct smell both when you burn wool, anything with wool in it, or silk. It smells like burnt hair very distinctly. So that's kind of an easier one to do burn tests on as well. But as always, if you have any questions, leave them down below in the comments and I will be sure to answer those the best of my ability. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday. I will see you Friday with a Sew the Look. And then Sunday, well, I've got the vlog that'll be up tomorrow, this past week's vlog that'll be up tomorrow. And then, or Wednesday. And then Friday, Sew the Look. And then Sunday, it'll be part 3 of the B6674 Sew Along. So make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already so you don't miss any of that. I hope you guys have a wonderful week and are able to get some sewing in, and I will see you all next time. Bye!